Ding dong, mother scratches. Welcome to World History 9, flip lesson number 1, sourcing in history. Welcome, rookies. All right, today we're going to look at the first big topic this year, and that's sourcing in history. You'd think we would start with maybe the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, maybe imperialism. No, we going right to the source. We talking about sourcing in history. So what you need to do in your notebooks, if you haven't done this already, is go to your table of contents, write down sourcing in history, and today's date, which is 8/18/18. We're going with Saturday's date. So even if you're watching this on Friday evening or Sunday, doesn't matter. We're putting that same date in your table of contents. All right, so where do we start? We start with this word right here, history. And more importantly, we're going to break this word down and we're going to go with this root, which is story. So when we study history, a lot of students, they get lost in the names and the dates and all that mess. When we study history in this class, we're going to be really focusing and thinking about where the stories are coming from, because that's what history is. History is just a collection of stories about our past. It kind of helps explain how we got here and who we are today. So we're looking at the stories, but more importantly, we're looking at the source. The source is the storyteller. Where are we getting these stories from? Who's telling the stories? And do those storytellers have a bias? Hey, if it's a whitey in Europe telling a story and they're telling a story about slavery, they could have a bias. We need to look at that. We need to look at our own history. You know, American Revolution, I mean, it depends on who's telling that story. If the British are telling that story, they have a very different view of the American Revolution. If the colonists are telling the story, they've got a different perspective. So again, we need to look at that source. We need to look at that storyteller. All right? So having said that, when we look at the storyteller, that's the source, we need to ask ourselves, is that storyteller reliable? Are they credible? So I want you to think about this in terms of your own friends. Like if you need information and that information has to be exact, it has to be accurate, we all have those friends who tend to exaggerate and they tend to be full of drama. And we know if we need accurate information, we don't go to them friends. We go to the friends that are more trustworthy and more reliable. Same idea with history. Same idea with really anything in early college. When we're looking at sources, we want those sources that are more trustworthy, more reliable. So we're going to talk about two different types of sources in history that we deal with on a daily basis. And remember, in our notes in history class, we only write down the information that's in bold font and that's underlined. So on this particular screen, we would just be writing this information down. We want to read this, but we don't have to write this down. Just this. That's what we're writing right here. This stuff in yellow, all right? So first thing we're looking at is primary source. Primary source, that's as far back as we can go to the original event. We can look at that as the raw material, the firsthand account, the eyewitness account. That's a primary source. So examples in history class would be historical documents, the results of experiments, statistical data, pieces of creative writing, art objects, and eyewitness accounts. Those are all primary sources. Diary of Anne Frank, a lot of you guys read that in middle school. Excellent, excellent example of a primary source. Anne Frank was there during the Holocaust. She experienced the Holocaust firsthand, and she told her story about it. That's a primary source. The other type of source we deal with in history is a secondary source. Again, this is bold and underlined, so you want to write that down in your notes. So a secondary source, unlike a primary source, is something that's written about the primary source. So a good example is the little activity we did last week in class where I pulled out those three students and they observed that mock conflict I had with another student. And then they went in class and they pulled out three other students, four other students, And they told them, like, man, this is what happened, Mr. O'Neill, and so was out in the hallway, and this happened, and that happened. And they were telling their story to those students, all right? So those eyewitnesses told their story to a second group of students, and then that second group of students went in the class and pulled out more students and retold the story. That's a secondary source. So if you tell someone else what I told you, you become the secondhand source or the secondary source. So we deal with these all the time. Basically, they're comments, interpretations, and discussions of the original material. In class, they might be an article in a newspaper, maybe an article in a popular magazine, book or a movie review. You can find them in scholarly journals. Your textbook is a good example of a secondary source. When we're looking at sources, whether they're primary or secondary, you always want to look at a couple things to determine how credible and reliable they are. One thing is the publication date. Like, how old is this material, especially with secondary sources? Like, I mean, if we have a choice between a textbook written in 1955 and a textbook that's just published in 2018, we're going 2018. Because that information is probably more deeply researched, maybe some facts surfaced over the years. It's going to be more reliable, more trustworthy. What's the reputation of the publication? Has it been a newspaper that's been around for 150 years? Does it have a wide circulation? Do a lot of people trust it? Do they spend their hard-earned money on that publication? Then it's probably going to be a little more reliable, more trustworthy. And then, is it a scientific report? Is it an eyewitness account? If it's a work of fiction, well, fiction's made up. So we know right there it's probably not too reliable, too credible. We're going to look at something called CARS, and I'm big on acronyms. Acronyms are just words in which each letter basically stands for or represents another word. So in this acronym, we're using it as a checklist to kind of determine whether a source is reliable and credible. So CARS is our acronym. The C is going to stand for credibility. The A is going to stand for accuracy. R stands for reasonableness. And S stands for support. Again, this is underlined and in bold font, so you want to write that down in your notebooks. And you're going to use this acronym anytime you look at a source in history. Hey, think about your textbook. You know, is that textbook credible? Meaning, can you believe the information in the textbook? Is it accurate, factual? Is it reasonable? Does it have a reasonable tone, which we'll get into in a minute? And do they list their sources? Where do they get that information from? What are their sources? So this is our checklist. We always ask, is it credible? Is it accurate? Is it reasonable? Does it have support? So credibility, when we're looking at, especially at websites, we always want to check that URL. That's that dot, whatever comes after the website, .com, .gov, .edu. .gov and .edu, those are golden. If you come across a website that's .gov or .edu, they tend to be very reliable, very credible. We want to check and see if there's a sponsor, a university-sponsored website or a government-sponsored website, medical agency-sponsored website, definitely tend to be more credible and reliable. Does the author list his or her name? If so, those tend to be a little bit more reliable and credible rather than an anonymous site. And then what's the purpose? Are they trying to sell you something or are they informing you something? If they're trying to sell you or persuade you, then you have to question the reliability and credibility. Accuracy. Is the information correct? Is it up to date? And these two things I want you to write down, spelling and grammar mistakes. Those are red flags. I mean, if you're on a website and it's chock full of spelling errors and grammar mistakes, you've got to question the reliability of that source. Anyone who's putting something out there that's so rushed and haphazard, I don't know about that. So those are red flags you definitely want to look into. Reasonableness, the tone. Is that information angry or whiny in its tone, or is it professional? Bias, does it lean more towards one side over the other? And logic, does it make sense? So here's what we want. We want a professional tone. We want a balanced account where the author isn't biased over one side or the other. And we want it logically presented so it makes sense. Then it tends to be more credible and reliable. Lastly, support. Is it sponsored by a reputable author? Does the author cite their research? And does the author provide contact information so you can fact check? Again, these right here help us to determine whether it's credible and reliable. Looking at the author or the speaker themselves, is he or she an expert in the field? Do they have a master's degree or even better yet, a PhD in that field? That tends to make them more credible and reliable. Is the author biased? Do they have a strong political view that they're trying to get across? Or do they present both sides? And then what values does the author bring to the topic? Does the author have some type of an agenda? Are they out for personal gain? Whether it's trying to sell books or trying to get elected. Those are some things you have to think about when you think about the author. We want our authors to be experts. We want our authors to be unbiased. And we want our authors to present information rather than try to make money or maybe gain political advantage. Credible and reliable. All right, take a look at some of these. Let's see what we got here. We got some news publications. We got the Enquirer, the National Enquirer. We got an article, Woman Married a Shark. He's a lot better than any man. Mm-hmm. And then Brit's having my baby. Oh, hell no. Are these publications credible? How do you know? Go back to your CARS checklist. I want you in your notes to tell me if these publications are credible or reliable, and if so, why? If not, why? What do you think? Okay, USA Today, you've probably seen that before on newsstands. Take a look at some of the headlines there. Again, how credible? And go back to your CARS checklist. What do you think? Tell me why or why not. How reliable? Wikipedia. That's an interesting one. Because I know a lot of y'all mother scratchers like to use your Wikipedia. Is it reliable? Is it credible? Why or why not? Go back to your CARS checklist. We got the Encyclopedia Britannica right here. And we got the Electronic Pocket Oxford English Dictionary. Credible or reliable or not? What do you think? Google. Everybody loves the Google web. Ask Google, they know. Is it reliable? Is it credible? What do you think? Again, go back to CARS. Lastly, that mother scratcher right there. Yo, history teacher, Mr. O. Is he reliable and credible? What you think? Don't worry, I got thick skin. You can tell me what's on your mind. You can tell me if you think I'm reliable and credible or not. I'm okay with that. Okay, mother scratches, that's it for today's lesson. We are going to have a little follow-up lesson on Monday, Tuesday called the lunch fight, dealing with credible and reliable sources. Any questions you have, shoot me an email. Other than that, enjoy your nice sunny weekend, and we will see you in Air 301 on Monday. Ding dong, mother scratches.